Mellow greetings, everybody. My name is James. I am from the internet. And today, rather than talking about some ridiculously convoluted political or economic theory, we are going to talk about one of the simplest and most basic things that all people have in common. We're going to talk about food. Now, biologists and cultural anthropologists have been studying this sort of thing for centuries, and they've determined that human beings spent tens of thousands of years as an advancing species chasing food around. Why? Because tens of thousands of years ago, as a simple and unadvanced species that was still clawing its way upward, we figured out that we need food to survive. And so we chased food around to stay alive. And then, about 12,000 years ago, human beings figured out that maybe, just maybe, if they went to where the food was and they stayed there and they worked the land and they grew food, nobody would go hungry and the species would thrive and advance. And that was the beginning of societies. And yet, after all that grand evolution, 12,000 years later, I'm now sitting here staring into a camera telling you all about how capitalism and politics are now driving people back down into the primordial ooze because food is no longer readily available. Food, the reason why we established societies, cultures, and civilizations in the first place. Our societies and culture have now evolved to the point where money is more important than food. So we're starving people and letting them die so that a handful of people can make more money. Now, rather than rant and rave, I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes telling you about actual human beings and actual people who are actually being driven into starvation by the very systems that we supposedly created to help people and make society better. Buckle up, because I'm going to go fast. Frankly, if I start going slow on this and I spend too much time thinking about it, I'm going to get all sad and weepy. And I don't think any of you want to watch an old fat guy break down 2 feet away from a camera recording in HD. Families strained by the pandemic are turning to food banks struggling to keep up. Even before COVID-19 stripped people of their jobs, shuttered businesses, and claimed hundreds of thousands of American lives, some 13.7 million U.S. families, more than 10% of all households, were experiencing food insecurity at some point in 2019. The pandemic has only made things worse. Researchers at Northwestern University estimate that food insecurity rates have more than doubled, now impacting as many as 23% of U.S. households. Among families with children, the problem is all the more dire. Food insecurity can delay brain development, cause children to fall behind in school, and culminate in behavioral issues. As of July, approximately 14 million kids weren't getting enough to eat. That's right, here in America, the land of plenty. The greatest country in the world, with the most tremendous economy in the world, and billions of acres of farmland, 14 million kids, and that's just the reported number, are literally going to bed hungry. And now, as we go into the holiday season, the season of plentiful bounty, for which we are thankful, because our hard work all year has resulted in a bounty and a celebration and a feast that we can enjoy with our families and reflect upon how hard we worked and how far we came. Yeah, all that's going out the window now. That shit's gone. Quote, the past year had seen a once-in-a-century pandemic, a manic stock market, 10 million pink slips, and viral photos of cars in mile-long lines at food handouts. An estimated 8 million Americans had slipped below the poverty line since May, and more than 50 million Americans, or 1 in every 6 people, were expected to experience food insecurity sometime over the course of the year. And that tide of need is likely to surge again soon. Without intervention from federal government, the clock will run out on federal unemployment insurance and a nationwide eviction moratorium, leaving 12 million without benefits and 40 million renters at risk of eviction, all of which will affect food access, particularly in rural areas where food pantries are scarce. Yeah, I want you all to know I'm just painting the tableau here before I really go in on stories and I start telling you about actual people. And again, these are your people. These are my people. These are actual people, okay? These are people who live in your neighborhood. These are the people that you work with. These are people in your family, many of which are probably not even telling you that they're going to bed hungry, that they can't feed their kids, that they spent all day online at a food bank to get 40 pounds worth of food to put in the pantry so their kids didn't wonder if they were actually going to have dinner or not. Experts say the winter months typically push more people into hunger, seasonal work ends, and colder temperatures drive up utility costs. This winter, however, arrives as a deadlocked Congress fails to offer a new relief fund and as rising coronavirus cases threaten new shutdown measures. This is where I stop and briefly point out that the week before Thanksgiving is when employment numbers usually turn around because seasonal work kicks in. However, just this week alone, 750,000 Americans filed new first-time unemployment claims. So as the weather gets colder and there are fewer jobs, this is going to become the norm, not an outlier position. Seems like a bad time to go hungry. If only there were some jobs out there. If only there was a government that was supporting its people and actually sending them money and checks so they could put food on the table, just like they're doing in every single other fucking nation in the world, except for here in America, where we're more fucking concerned about making the goddamn line go up than we are about stamping out childhood hunger during the middle of a goddamn pandemic. Thousands pour into Fair Park for North Texas Food Bank's largest distribution yet during pandemic. With the crisis continuing to inflict hunger across the region, Saturday's event was geared towards Thanksgiving, providing turkeys and other holiday staples to some 8,500 families. Hey, remember just a few years ago when you'd hear about Black Friday sales, and that would be the line of cars of people going out to buy shitty plastic items for their family to show them how much they love them? Yeah, that's now the line for people to get food. Thousands of families, including some who waited nearly 12 hours, turned out Saturday at the usually empty grounds of the Fair Park for the North Texas Food Bank's fifth and largest mega distribution of food during the coronavirus pandemic. Since the pandemic started in March, the food bank has held several such events at Fair Park and helped put on many smaller events to alleviate the hunger and financial stress many families have faced since the federal government has abdicated all responsibility and has left you all to hang after fucking putting $3 billion into the hands of their friends and the bankers, but not you. A few hours down the road from that food bank in Texas, feeding Houston's hungry 1 million pounds of food daily for the needy. In lines of cars stretching more than half a mile, people thrown out of work by the coronavirus pandemic queue up with other needy people to receive some of the 1 million pounds of food distributed some days by the Houston Food Bank. Among the ranks of recipients is an unemployed construction worker named Herman, whose wife is a home improvement store worker and now the sole breadwinner for the family of 5. They tried to get food stamps, but were told they only qualified for $25 of federal food assistance monthly. Quote, "As a man, as a father, as a provider, I felt at a low point. I felt low," he said as he waited in his car. In this type of situation, there's nothing you can really do. Distributions by the Houston Food Bank now average about 800,000 pounds of food a day after reaching the unprecedented 1 million pound mark for the first time in the spring, a level that the organization still delivers periodically. Quote, "It had that feeling of a disaster, like the hurricanes in the Gulf. It was shocking how the lines exploded so quickly." It's not shocking at all. The American populace got one $1,200 check 8 months ago, if they were lucky. They got to pull anywhere from 10 to 26 weeks of unemployment, depending on what state they lived in. We're now 8 months out. Coronavirus is peaking, and we have to lock down because the pandemic kills people. But instead of wearing masks, gutting it out, and having the government send us checks, no, we want to be rugged individualists. Yeah, how's that working out? Now, I understand this has become a flashpoint for conversation between people who have varying views on what government's role should be to help its people during the pandemic. Yes, I understand there's a lot of people who are pissed that their town or city or state is getting locked down And small businesses are getting squeezed out of existence while big box stores are allowed to thrive, which is why Walmart and Amazon and companies like that are making hundreds of millions of dollars of profit additionally every month than they used to make, while small businesses are closing left and right and people are losing their livelihood. I get that. But this is what states are supposed to do. They're supposed to maintain and protect the public health. And when they do that, the federal government is supposed to work in tandem with them to support their efforts to ensure that the economy doesn't implode while public health is being improved. The federal government, however, has once again abdicated all responsibility beyond giving money to their crony friends. And this is why there are mile-long lines at food banks and people living in cars. Now, I'm done reading statistics, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the hell this actually looks like while I read you a few quick stories of actual individuals who are actual human beings, who are people who live in your neighborhood. They go to your church. Their kids go to school with your kids. And some of them are going to bed hungry. And a lot of them still probably aren't telling people because they're embarrassed and they're ashamed because they feel somehow they have failed, even though it is their government, once again, that has absolutely and unequivocally failed. Since the coronavirus pandemic upended her life and so many others, Alexis has spent most of her days traveling from food bank to food bank in order to get enough food to survive, gathering food not only for herself and her 4 children, but also her neighbors in need. She pulls her packed silver Volkswagen van alongside the BMWs and Mercedes as they edge their way through the long, snaking food lines. Quote, "I want people to understand the face of the needy is different now. Just because I have a car doesn't mean that I have enough money to buy food." There was a family in Jackson, Mississippi that relied on local food bank over the summer, even though before the pandemic they had been making almost 6 figures a year. That's a nice living in a place like Jackson, and it got them a house in a leafy suburb and a Chevy Suburban and even a vacation to Florida. Or the single mother in Tennessee who finally pushed her way into the middle class with a job that paid enough to send her oldest daughter to private school, only to find herself accepting food from charity. Alexis faced her new financial circumstances with as much determination as she could, even as it shook her sense of what it meant to have made it. Before the pandemic, she was a hairstylist at a salon owned by her mother-in-law that would eventually shut down in accordance with California's coronavirus rules. Her husband, Adam, saw far fewer people come into his local Ford dealership where he works, and his commissions have plummeted. It's almost like people can't afford to buy a car or even make payments on the car that they bought 2 years ago, because the federal government has abdicated all responsibility and left you to fucking starve. Every day she gets private messages from her friends saying they need help but are embarrassed at not being able to provide for their families anymore. She reminds them they're not the only ones. In Cleveland, a woman who had once been prosperous enough to be a donor to the local food bank found herself on the receiving end of collecting food. Ciara, a single mother in Memphis, grew up poor, but in recent years had worked her way to economic stability. She was hired last year as a manager at Logan's Roadhouse, a restaurant chain in the South, earning $60,000 a year, more money than she had ever made. She put her daughter into a Christian school, bought a new Honda Accord, and took her 4 kids on their first vacation ever to Six Flags. Quote, "I felt myself finally in the middle class. Then the pandemic hit and Logan's closed." She's now receiving $275 a week in unemployment benefits, barely enough to cover her monthly rent of $975. She said she was ashamed to get food from neighborhood Christian centers and is embarrassed every time she pulls out her food stamp card at the grocery store. "I've always been a strong woman and a strong mother," she said. "I don't want my kids to see me struggle or stressed." I literally have thousands of these. Thousands of them. I read through the first 50 or so, and I completely lost my shit, and I had to stop. Now, make no mistake, everybody. What's currently happening is easily avoidable. There are many other countries in the world that are doing it, and they're doing it far better than we are. However, in America, the combination of our rugged individualist attitude, combined with our blind worship of the golden bull god who makes the line go up, has led us to be a country of people who are all work and no savings. And the only thing we do is we constantly strive for the next position up in the social ladder because it's what we're conditioned to do. It's what we're told to do. It's woven into the very fabric of our being as Americans. And now that we've done every last thing that the government has asked, we've been good citizens, we've worked hard, we paid our taxes, we mowed our lawns, we took our kids to school and to church, we made sure they could read, we made sure that they grew up to be decent human beings so that they would carry the torch into the next generation and continue making America better. We all did this. That was our job in the great social contract that we have with the United States government. But now when shit is tight and people need it the most, we're once again dicking around with partisan politics as millions of people go to bed hungry. This is unacceptable. This is shameful. And very, very soon, if this doesn't change drastically, these people are going to stop being polite. They're going to stop asking, and they're going to start demanding. And frankly, we should all be demanding better. It's time to start organizing, people, and keep your eye on the prize. My name's James. I'm from the internet. I'm out. Peace.